Hey there, my fellow creatures of good and evil. Welcome back, Monsters of the Blade. This is your host once again on Filomania, Knife Universe, and today we've got another unboxing straight from the United States. This package just arrived, and inside it, well, I wasn't exactly looking for this knife, it kind of found me. But the moment I saw it, I thought, alright, if I can't get my hands on a Strider right now, maybe this one could scratch that itch. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the name Strider, it's an iconic American knife brand with a serious reputation. Legendary among collectors, Strider made waves with its bold, tank-like designs, and even though the brand has changed over the years, its legacy is very much alive. But let's get one thing clear. This knife isn't a clone, it's not a knockoff, and it's definitely not a budget version. What we've got here is the result of a branching path one taken by Dwayne, one of the original co-founders of Strider Knives alongside Mick Strider. After going separate ways professionally, Dwayne decided to start designing his own blades, putting his name behind a new chapter in his knife-making journey. While Mick kept the Strider banner flying, Dwayne began working closely with top-tier Chinese manufacturers with full control over the design and quality. And let me tell you, the man's got talent. Just like Mick, Dwayne Dwyer is highly respected in the knife world for his eye for design and relentless pursuit of performance. So, what we have here is a knife that shares the spirit of Strider, especially in the lines and attitude, but not in price. It's not a downgrade, just a different path. Alright, enough talking. Let's get into it and see what's inside the box. Let's take a look at the presentation. Alright, here it is, North Mountain Blade. For those of you who want to check out their website, there's a handy little QR code right there on the box. Just scan it with your phone and you're good to go. Now, let's see what's inside. Okay, nothing else under the lid except the knife's silhouette etched into the packaging. Very slick. Honestly, the whole box gives off a premium feel. You can tell they've put real thought into creating an unboxing experience, not just tossing the knife in some generic foam. What do we have here? What do we have here? There's a little tag that says custom goods, or at least I think that's what it says. The typography is, interesting, let's put it that way. Honestly, I can't even tell exactly what it says, but it looks cool. Then we've got the specs card, or what I assume is the specs card, though, to be honest, I can barely read what the hell it says either. Still, I did manage to make out a few things. Hardness, Trick 60, which is solid and reliable for EDC performance. Steel, listed as SLD Magic, which is a Chinese steel. We'll dive deeper into that a bit later. Model, BBNM. Year, 2025, so this one's fresh off the forge. The font might be questionable, but at least the info's there if you squint hard enough. Also inside the box is a nice little microfiber cloth standard fare, but always appreciated for wiping down the blade or handle after use. And check this out, we've got a full set of spare parts. Not something every knife includes, which is a nice touch. There's an extra pivot screw, bronze washers, a stop pin, likely for the frame lock mechanism, a second spare screw, and what looks like a backup barrel for the pivot assembly. All of this makes it clear that North Mountain is thinking about the long game, giving users the tools to maintain and enjoy their knife for years to come. This replacement kit is surprisingly complete, which is something I personally really appreciate. It's not just a nice touch, it shows real respect for the end user. You can feel they want you to actually use the knife, maintain it, and keep it in great shape over time. Now, let's get to the main event, the knife itself. It comes tucked inside this transparent, hard plastic case with the North Mountain Blade's branding right across the front. The black you see behind the knife is likely just the foam padding for protection. Let's open it up. Wow, the presentation is seriously impressive. No corners were cut here. They really went the extra mile to package this knife in a way that feels both protective and elegant. There's a certain minimalism to it, no over-the-top graphics or flashy gimmicks, and that gives it a high-end, serious vibe. You can instantly tell this is intended to be a quality product. This is actually my first time handling this particular model. Now, what was the name again? Damn, I already forgot. It's kind of a weird one. Ah, yes, BBNM. That's the model name. It's not exactly easy to remember. I had to double-check the box just to be sure. There's no classic name like Falcon or Viper here, just 4 letters, BBNM. I'll be honest, I would have preferred something a little more pronounceable. But hey, we'll see later if those letters stand for something meaningful. For now, let's just stick with BBNM. Oh yeah, that's good. The action still feels a bit stiff, though definitely tight out of the box. Looks like it came from the factory with everything torqued down a bit more than usual. Check this out. It doesn't quite drop shut yet. Nope, not even close. That blade's sticking in place like it's holding onto a secret. But hey, no worries, I'll be tuning it up for sure. The pivot system caught my attention immediately. It's not just any ordinary pivot, this design is visually striking and pays direct homage to the original Strider style. If you're familiar with Strider knives, you'll recognize this instantly. That hollowed-out, through-body pivot is part of their signature look. And since Dwayne Dwyer was part of the original Strider team, it makes sense that this design language carried over. He probably still holds the rights to use this specific pivot style, or at least had a hand in creating it. It's functional and iconic. Now, even though it looks custom or proprietary, you don't actually need a special tool to adjust it. Believe it or not, a standard Torx driver fits right in there. It's kind of surprising the first time you realize it. You'd think it's just a decorative hollow, but nope. There's actually a Torx socket nestled deep inside, and that's what I'll be using to back off the tension a bit. Like most folders, the action will probably break in over time, but this one's definitely on the stiff side from the get-go. Now, let me check something real quick off camera. Yep, the blade looks ever so slightly off-center, just a hair to the left. But honestly, nothing to worry about. It's still well within acceptable tolerances and looks pretty well centered overall. No red flags here. All right, let's talk ergonomics. As you can see, this knife features a handle design that slopes downward with a subtle ergonomic curve. It gives your hand a really natural, comfortable grip, something you notice the moment you pick it up. That smooth contouring sets it apart from the original Strider knives, which were known for their more angular, aggressive design lines. On a traditional Strider, the drop in the handle tends to be much steeper and more abrupt, which sometimes creates a sharp edge or corner near the rear palm area. I'll be honest, I've never personally owned an original Strider, so I can't give you a direct comparison from experience. But just from studying their shape, that hard angle might not be the most glove-friendly or forgiving for extended use. In contrast, this BBNM model offers a noticeably smoother experience in the hand. It feels like it was designed with real-world comfort in mind, not just aesthetics. One thing I really like is the forward finger choil. That little notch lets you choke up on the blade, bringing your index finger closer to the cutting edge, while the rest of your fingers naturally shift forward on the handle. It gives you a better sense of control and increases leverage, especially useful for precise cuts or putting a bit more pressure behind your slicing. Now, here's something that might surprise you. There's no jimping on the spine. That's right, the blade is completely smooth at the top. No notches, no grip texture, just a clean, flat surface. And weirdly enough, I don't really miss it. You'd think the absence of jimping would be a drawback, but the truth is, the knife doesn't feel slippery or insecure at all. The overall grip is so solid that your thumb naturally finds its place even without those little traction bumps we're all used to. So yeah, it's an unusual choice, but in this case, it actually works. Now, let's be fair, just because the spine doesn't have jimping up top doesn't mean this knife is poorly built. In fact, when you look toward the back of the handle, you'll notice there is a form of traction built in. Right here, you've got a series of sculpted grooves, a sort of combination of low and raised relief textures that form a kind of rear jimping pattern. It's not rounded or softened, the edges are actually a bit sharp, designed specifically to prevent slipping. And, in a standard grip, your thumb naturally lands right in that area, locking you in nicely. However, and this is important, once you choke up using the forward finger choil we mentioned earlier, your thumb ends up resting much farther forward beyond that jimping zone. And even then, it still feels good. I didn't find myself wishing for extra grip up there. That smooth spine doesn't compromise control in any noticeable way, though, honestly, A little jimping on the blade spine wouldn't have hurt either. It wouldn't be necessary, but it also wouldn't be unwelcome. So I'll leave it at that. It's clearly a design choice. Aesthetic overfunction perhaps, but a calculated one. And speaking of design, let's talk blade shape. What we have here is a tanto blade with those sharp, defined transitions and aggressive angles. It's a look that screams purpose-built, and it offers great piercing strength and a strong tip for tough tasks. I've heard that this model is also available in a drop point version, which is typically more versatile and better suited for slicing. I'll double check that to be sure, but for now, we're looking at a classic tanto profile, flat spine, angular belly, and a powerful reinforced tip. It's a bold choice and very much in line with the Strider-inspired aesthetic we've seen throughout this knife. Now let's take a closer look at this edge geometry. The transition from the flat section of the blade into the tanto tip has a much cleaner, smoother curve than I expected. It's elegant without losing that aggressive look. As for the blade steel, I mentioned earlier that it's labeled as SLD Magic. At first glance, it sounds like a Chinese proprietary blend, but after digging in a bit more, turns out it's actually Japanese in origin. That's right, this is a Japanese tool steel known for its excellent edge retention and stable performance. The advertised hardness rating is around 60 HRC, which puts it in the pretty tough category, not too brittle, not too soft. It strikes a nice balance for everyday carry and hard use applications. Of course, you'll find steels out there that clock in higher, some even in the 63 to 65 HRC range, but with higher hardness comes the risk of chipping if you're not careful. Now let's talk finish. This blade doesn't have a true hamon line, the kind you'd find on a traditionally forged katana, but what it does have is a decorative hamon-style polish, an aesthetic line that runs just above the cutting edge. This visual detail gives the blade a distinct, almost spiritual nod to Japanese sword craftsmanship. You'll notice that the portion near the edge has a higher polish, almost a mirror-like shine, while the upper part of the blade remains more muted and matte, creating contrast. That contrast is enhanced by some subtle milling lines or grind marks which separate the bright bevel from the rest of the blade. I mean, look at it, that finish is borderline mirror polished. It reflects light beautifully. In fact, let me grab the microfiber cloth that came with the knife, give it a quick wipe. There we go. Now you can really appreciate that mirror finish. It's sharp, clean, and catches the light just right like a functional piece of art. All right, let's take a careful look at this edge detail. Not sure if the camera is picking it up clearly, maybe you can catch a glimpse if the light hits it just right. And here's where things get interesting. This knife showcases a triple finish blade, something you don't see every day at this price point. Right above the polished bevel, there's a section with a subtle bead-blasted texture, giving it that soft, matte opaqueness. It creates a great contrast against the reflective lower edge. Then, as you move up to the flats, the upper, flat portions of the blade, you're met with a machine-applied satin finish. It's clean, consistent, and adds a layer of visual depth. So, in total, you've got mirror polish at the edge, bead blast in the midsection, satin flats at the top. That's a pretty bold combination, and personally, I love it. Just look at how it reflects. You can literally see the windows of my house mirrored in the blade. That's how clean that finish island. Now, let's move on to the handle scales. These bad boys are made of bronze, and that brings a few things to the table. First, it looks amazing. Second, it's heavy. Heavier than titanium, heavier than steel. This knife clocks in at 6.7 ounces, or about 190 grams, and yeah, that's no featherweight. You're definitely going to feel this one in your pocket. But as we like to say here on Filomania, we love our knives with presence. We love that solid, hefty feel in the hand, because when you're holding something heavy, you feel like you're holding a purpose. We're holding a tool that, thanks to its own mass and density, gives you added confidence and extra force when performing piercing or thrust-based tasks. That weight isn't just cosmetic, it actively enhances control. There's something primal about the way a heavy-duty blade settles into your hand. It lets you know this is not a toy. Now, moving to the back of the knife, The rear side of the handle is made from titanium, and it features a stone-washed finish. At first glance, it might look like bead blast, but if you look closely, and I hope the camera picks it up, you'll notice those subtle, random micro scratches that give it that signature washed texture. This effect is created by tumbling the titanium with thousands of small round stones, hence the name stonewash. It softens reflections, hides wear over time, and gives the titanium a beautifully rugged, broken-in look right out of the box. Now let's talk about the pocket clip. And wow, it's very reminiscent of the classic Strider style. That squared-off look, the way it hugs the frame, it's immediately recognizable. Personally, I love it. The clip is laser engraved with the North Mountain Blades logo, a subtle but classy touch. And in terms of functionality, this thing is rock solid. It has no wiggle, no rattle. You don't get that annoying metallic tap-tap sound when you flick the knife or handle it, which means the clip is tensioned just right. It's firm, secure, and strong. Once this knife goes into your pocket, it's going to stay there. Think pit bull grip. Now, about the screws. They look like standard Torx T8 or maybe T10, used across the frame and for the clip attachment. And just above the pivot, you'll notice a lock bar stabilizer, that little disc embedded in the titanium. And you might be asking, what's that for? That little screw you see right there? That's what we call a lock bar stabilizer. What does it do? Well, its main job is to act as a limit stop for the frame lock bar specifically, to prevent it from being pushed too far outward to the left when you disengage the lock. Without it, over time, repeated use could cause the titanium lock bar to bend too far out of its ideal range. And if that happens, when you go to close the knife and it resets, the lock might not engage properly anymore. You'd end up with the frame barely making contact with the blade tang, locking at, say, 10% or 15%, when it should ideally be around 30–40%. That shallow engagement means there's a higher risk the lock could fail under pressure. Right now, as you can see, this knife is locking up at around 40%, maybe even closer to 50% if I press it in a bit, and that's excellent. It means the blade is very secure. But over the years, if you were to stress that lock bar too much, it could flex or lose memory, and suddenly, your secure 40% lockup becomes a weak 10% engagement, and that's dangerous. A shallow lockup like that can fail under a hard thrust or impact cut, and if it does, guess where that blade is going? That's right, into your fingers. So the stabilizer doesn't make the lock stronger per se, but it ensures that it stays consistent and doesn't weaken with age. It's a small but critical piece of engineering, one that experienced knife users will always appreciate. Now, moving on, one thing to note. This knife doesn't have a backspacer. Now, take a look at this little hole right here. It's strange. At first glance, you might think it's a lanyard hole, but no, that's definitely not what Island. There's no way a paracord or lanyard would fit through there, especially not with the blade tip sitting that close. That would be downright dangerous. Then there's this second hole, located closer to the pocket clip. Again, it doesn't look like a typical lanyard hole either. It's far too narrow and seems to serve no functional purpose for threading cord. My best guess is that it's part of the clip's structural mounting system, maybe a secondary anchor point or part of the design language. It's unusual, I'll give it that. You don't normally see this kind of dual-hole setup that isn't meant for lanyard use. It could just be a purely aesthetic decision, a visual cue to add character to the frame. And hey, it had me second-guessing for a second, so it's definitely doing something. Most knives that have holes in that position usually let you pass a cord through so you can tug it out of your pocket more easily or attach beads or fobs. But in this case, looks like it's just for looks. Honestly, I don't think those are meant to be used for deployment. I mean, technically, you can try to flick the blade open using the upper studs, but right now, I feel like I'm about to peel the skin off my thumb. My guess? Those are stop pins, not thumb studs. You can see how they interact with the frame. They make contact with the inside of the scales and serve as hard stops to hold the blade in the open position, vertically locked and rock solid. And speaking of solidity, this thing is tight. No blade play whatsoever, not side to side, not up and down. Zero wiggle. That lockup is tank-like. That said, I'm still surprised by just how tight the pivot came from the factory. Most knives will swing closed on their own once the lock is disengaged, but not this one. The blade stays in place unless you guide it all the way down. It's clear the pivot was cranked down hard. But hey, this is an unboxing. I'm not going to adjust it just yet. I want to see if the action loosens up naturally over time. If not, I'll take a Torx bit, as I mentioned earlier, and make a slight adjustment. Once that tension is dialed in, I'm sure the closing action will become smoother and more responsive, giving me that snappy, drop-shut feel that we all love. So, first impressions overall? Visually, this knife is stunning. The design is sleek, sporty, and elegant. And in the hand, it feels purpose-built. The ergonomics are dialed in, the grip is confident, and the overall fit and finish make it feel like you're holding not just a knife, but a well-engineered tool. This is definitely a high-quality knife, though, to be clear. I wouldn't quite call it premium tier. Not exactly. But if you've enjoyed this BBNM model and you're thinking of picking one up, here's a cool detail. You can also get it with carbon fiber scales, which will make it significantly lighter. I believe there's also a version with titanium handles as well. I personally went with bronze because, as you know, I love heavy knives. I like the solid feel, and I'm also a fan of the color tone that bronze develops over time. Of course, bronze does develop a natural patina, which means it oxidizes and darkens a bit as it reacts with moisture and skin oils. But that's part of the charm. If you prefer the shiny look, you can always polish it back to its original luster with a metal cleaner. But me? I don't mind it aging. In fact, look at this. I just unboxed it, and already here in humid Lima, with my high pH skin, you can see it starting to darken. But that warm, golden brassy tone underneath still shines through. And that's the beauty of bronze. It evolves with you. All right, friends, that brings us to the end of today's unboxing. It's been a pretty long one, I'll admit, but I wanted to take the time to really go in-depth on this beautiful design from Dwayne the Mind, who once co-founded Strider. And by the way, Strider Knives is still around, in case you were wondering. The company didn't shut down Dwayne, simply branched off and started his own projects. Both names are alive and well. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this extended unboxing and deep dive into the BBNM. From me and all my fellow monsters of the blade, we wish you a great week. Stay sharp and see you in the next one. Ciao!